Welcome back to CS170 fall session. Before I start with the continuation of chapter 19 with the JavaScript functions, just want to quickly rehash what we covered in the last lecture. And actually, even before that, let me just do a couple quick service announcements. Number one, if you are doing like email, sending myself or the TA something, do try to make sure you use like the regular Rutgers email address, through Outlook or whatever, as opposed to using the Canvas mail. I know for sure I don't really check the Canvas mail too much, and I think a lot of the other TAs don't either. Most of us do check our Rutgers email on a regular basis, so you probably get a better response if you go through there. And I've also noticed on the Piazza side of things, not too many students are posting on there on some of their questions. So you should try to make use of that. The TAs have been told to monitor Piazza and try to respond to it on a timely basis. So, and also the students can also respond on Piazza too. So I think we haven't really been making great use of Piazza. So do try to ask questions there. And then additionally, we have office hours and lab hours. Lab hours, you can go to any of the lab hours. It doesn't have to be just for your TA. So that gives you a lot of options during the week, right? And for my office hours, you can attend, but just make sure you send me an email beforehand, because I don't really like all of the people who show up for my office hours to show up all at the same time. So I usually try to make arrangements before and have people pop up at scheduled times during the office hours. So that way we don't have, we try not to have multiple people locked up on the office hour at the same time. So, that's that. And if you look at, some of the, common questions or issues and stuff like that, like I said, if it's something that, other people can potentially help you with, could be like, software's on your computer or something like that, do try to see if you can use resources that's out there on the internet or post it on Piazza, and you might be able to get your responses quicker. Okay. All right. So, last time we covered local versus global variable, and I'm just kind of re-emphasizing that and try to pay attention to what I did to walk you through how the variables are being declared, assigned, and what happens when you actually pass these values into a function, right? Because you will definitely get at least one, if not 2 or 3 questions like this that will ask you to trace these values all the way through and get something like this. What is the final value of X, Y, and Z, whatever, right? So, if you don't understand my explanation of it and your TA can't explain it or whatever, make sure you do follow up on that. And, these type of questions, it's fine. I can usually cover them in my office hour if you have time. The other thing I want to note also is that a lot of people have asked me questions about like specific grading, free lates, questions about the assignments themselves. Just want to remind you that the assignments and the exams, the grading is actually handled by the TAs. I'll step in to facilitate if there is like a dispute or disagreement about how something is scored. But other than that, it's really on the TAs to manage the assignments and the grading, both for the assignments and for the quizzes, exams, and whatnot. So if you send me an email and ask me a question, I'm just going to turn right around and ask the TA. So you might as well just talk directly to the TAs for whatever questions you might have. Okay. All right. Now, let's go to the main idea on a couple of these other ones here. So we started working on this sample function calls here, right? So this here is giving you an example of how to create a function, right? Remember the function declaration. You remember for JavaScript, you have to use the script tag here, right? And this is how you get JavaScript in there in general, but in particular, how to declare a function, okay? And then this is an example of calling the function, right? So the simplest thing is, the last example we had, which is using a button, right? So you remember from like just was it 2 or 3 lectures ago? You have this input type and it's a text box, right? That's to do your display. And then you have a button, right? And you're going to have like an on-click event to call that simple function. Okay. So that's what we got to last time, right? And then the other thing that was an important concept is the idea of passing data into that function, right? So remember, this is the parameter, right? And you're passing arguments into this simple function here, okay? And then you're using this parameter as a variable, essentially, right? So past data, right? So here's more on parameter, and then this is returning the answer coming out of the function, okay? So here you do a return, and it could be a variable like in this case, but I can do something like 1 + 2 or 1 × 2 or something like that, some sort of calculation, and the output from that calculation can return, okay? And here on the main code part where, let's say I had that button, right? Look at what I did here, right? You have the var, which is you're declaring this variable called answer, right? And you're taking the output coming back from this function, right? And so that's how you get that value, okay? Make sure each of these things I'm highlighting, make sure you understand these concepts. If you don't, make sure you'll be scheduling some time with your TAs for lab hours and stuff like that, or if you want to grab me for office hour on Friday, okay? All right, so the next part here is a very simple calculation, talking about calculating your pay, right? The basic calculation would be your hours worked times the rate that you're getting paid per hour, okay? We do have a concept, we can talk about a concept of overtime, okay? And if you have the overtime, notice this is where we have some conditional logic, right? So in the conditional logic, you have your if statement, your if word, right? Then your open paren, close paren, and within that, you do a comparison, okay? So before I go into that calculation or that comparison, let me just go back up to here. Notice this point here. First, you declare the variable hours, which is fine, right? And then equals, right? Now you're going to initialize that based on the input that you're going to get from the person using your page. And so this is where they use prompt, right? Prompt will just basically pop up a box. It's almost like similar to the alert box, right? Now this is for getting an input. So you have prompt, and then it says enter hours worked, right? But notice what they did here, right? They put a 1 times that. So what does that actually do? This is similar to what I did with the number, right? Remember, like capital NUMBER, right? And open paren, close paren, and you put that in there. That's to cast a variable to be a number, right? That tells the computer you're working with a number there, right? And you saw what happens if your computer gets confused on whether something is a number, a variable is a number or a string. By putting a 1, which is a number, obviously, 1 times whatever, if that's a number, you're not going to change the value of it, right? So if you put in 5 hours work, 1 times 5 is still going to be 5. But now you've actually basically told the computer that the variable hours is a number, okay? So that's the reason why you have this 1 times prompt, and whatever you input, hopefully you put it a number, it becomes a number for the variable hours, right? And then the same thing for pay rate. Okay, all right, so now you got these variables set. Now it does a comparison. So now we have hours, and if hours is greater than 40, so if I punched in like 45 hours or something like that, that means it's 45 greater than 40. So I go into this calculation here, right? And what happens is you're gonna have your base pay rate, which is this variable here, pay rate, and you put in whatever pay rate you put in there times 40 hours, right? Plus, now you're going to be talking about overtime, right? And so whatever hours you have, let's say you put in 45. So it's 45 minus 40, right? Which is your base pay, which is 5 hour. What did I say? 45 hours, right? So 45 times minus 40 is 5 hours times, let's say your overtime is time and a half, right? So it's 1.5 times the pay rate. And then you add that back to your base calculation, 40 times the pay rate. And that's how you calculate your pay, including overtime, right? Now, of course, if you work less than 40 hours, which, or in this case, less than or equal to 40 hours, then you have this else statement, right? And note these curly brackets. This is where you put your logic in here. Then you just say total pay equals hours times pay rate. And then we have an alert box, right? Which, like I said, is basically the opposite of your prompt, right? That just pops up the box and you say your total pay is blah, 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 okay? And really just to go along with this theme in this chapter, talking about functions, right? These are essentially functions, right? Right, so note this, right? I'm calling a function called prompt, right? And then I'm passing in this argument, which is a string, okay? And then likewise, same here, right? Alert, right? This is a function, and then I'm passing in this string here, and then plus total pay, okay? And what you're actually doing here is it'll be referred to as concatenation, right? You're basically concatenating this first string here plus whatever your calculation of total pay is. And then that puts it all together as a single string that goes into your alert box, okay? And so what does that look like when I have it in my notepad? Where do I have it? Right here, right? So yeah, all of the stuff I just talked about here all the way through, and it's within the script tag, okay? All right, so that's what that is. So let's see how that works in practice here. So I'm just going to, and you know, since I was doing all of this with prompts and alert box, that means I don't actually have anything on the screen, right? So let me refresh this. And here you go, hours worked, right? So let's say I did 30 hours. And let's say I got paid $10 an hour, then your total pay is $300. And there you go, okay? Right, and so the last thing that we have on this PowerPoint is talking about, oh, actually before that, let me just finish going through this, okay? So function weekly pay, okay? Now, here they actually translate it and putting this into like the HTML, right? So it doesn't matter, right? I kind of implemented the way they did it here, which is using prompt and alert box, okay? But maybe you don't like alert box, you don't like the prompt, and here's your inputs, right? Here you can input the hours, here you can input the pay per hour, and then your total pay, and then here your calculate pay button, okay? Let's see. And then this basically shows you how you set up these elements here, okay? And then you have the weekly pay button, okay? And you know, when we do this in class, they kind of do something like say, well, okay, if you do this, you can have like the on click, and then that's your event. Then what do you put in here? Okay, you're going to probably, you know, take your inputs and calculate your pay here, right? So here you have your function pay, okay? And where am I? Back to here, here, right? So you're going to call your function pay based on the inputs that you got for your hours worked and your pay rate per hour. So you'll call that, and then the output from that, you're going to assign to whatever variable. I can declare a variable in here, and then you can put that into a the text box, this text box here, your total pay. Okay, so your total pay box dot value equals to whatever variable, right, that you set to do the function. If you want to, you can actually squish everything into one thing. You can do total pay box dot value equals to, and then you can get the value out from your function pay, which is here, your function pay. Okay. So this is something that I'm going to put out there. You might want to treat this as your extra credit. So let's come back up to here. All right, so we started with this as your prompt and your alert. And then we walked it through, and then we got to here, and then we started showing you how to do this on the HTML side without using your prompt and alert box. Here you have your function. And here you start to use your CSS, right, to set this up. And then here you set up your text box, right? These two are your input. This one is your output. And then you have a button with the blank on click. And here, I basically just told you what you have to do. If you put that in there, then you'll get this to work. Call the function and then assign the output from that function into your total pay text box. Now, remember, if you're doing this, then you also need to remember to set these things to be numbers so you can do a proper calculation. Okay, so you have to use that number function. Okay, so let's set that as your extra credit for this week. Okay. Here, this is using like standard JavaScript function, right? So you're going to do this coin toss, heads or tails. You're going to use this math.random function and the math.round flip. Okay. So I think maybe you can kind of guess what this is doing, right? So math.random is going to generate a random number for you. And then math.round.flip, I mean, actually math.round is the function, will basically do some, do the rounding on it, right? Okay. So you want to take a look at these here and look at any of these terms here. And if you don't understand any of them, make sure you let us know because these are definitely basic stuff that we will be testing you on. So make sure you know these. Of course, you want to be able to write and use some basic functions and understand some of the built-in functions like date, math.random, math.floor, toString, and then the reasons why we use functions, right? I talked about that 2 lectures ago, right? Try to understand those reasons, right? And then try to understand the coin flipping and the memory bank example, okay? So I think that should be it for this part. And then the last thing here is, again, this is more practice here, and we're showing you the code here, right? So this one is doing this, right? It's setting up like the body and the buttons and whatnot. It's doing this, whatever background color of bisque is, right? Which is this color over here. Then you have your variables that you initialize, right? Preferred customer, yes or no, right? And then you create the page with the radio buttons here. Okay. And then you have like your, again, it's similar to what I asked you to do for extra credit all the way down here for your weekly pay. Of course, the weekly pay is a lot simpler, right? But up here, we have a similar type of thing where you're gonna put in the logic in here, the Java code from the on click to calculate based on all the stuff that you collected up here. Okay. So I'm not going to make this as extra credit. The only thing I would kind of suggest is that you do try and do this on your own even though I'm not really giving it to you as extra credit, because these are the type of things that, definitely is going to come into play for your assignment, definitely is going to come into play for your exam, right? You're going to be asked to do stuff like this. Do try it on your own. If you get stuck somewhere, this is something that you can bring to your TAs or to myself, and we can try to help you to get it to work. And it's not really even just a matter of getting it to work, but really getting it to the point where you understand why it works, right? Because like I said, you're going to get tested on this. Okay. So do take a look at this, try to follow along with this text, type this into your notepad or whatever editor you're using, and see if you can get to this point here where you can put in the calculation with the on click button, okay, for total cost. Okay, this is not extra credit. The other bit that I gave you is your extra credit to do your pay calculation. This is just for your own self-study. If you can get all of this done, you can do like the tracing of the global versus local variable, this thing. Then I think you probably have a good handle on what you need to do, both on assignment stuff and also on the exam. Okay. All right. Good luck. Thank you.